I apologise. I apologise. This is not. Oh, I'm being told from that. I apologise. Technical hitch. Right, we'll start again. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Inner West Community Committee. My name is Councillor Hesselwood, and I will be chairing today's meeting. The Inner West Community Committee covers the Armley, Bramley and Stanningley and Kirkstall wards, and is a committee where ward councillors and our co-optees have an opportunity to discuss and make decisions about services and priorities for the local area, and also consider funding applications regarding local community projects and youth activities. This meeting is being live streamed on the City Council's YouTube channel so that the public can observe the meeting without needing to be present. Could I now invite members and officers to introduce themselves, and I would ask you to mute your microphone once you've introduced yourself and put your microphone on as you are, as that will pick you up on the live stream. So if I could start to my left, please.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Debbie Oldham and I'm the clerk to the committee.
Councillor John Illingworth from Kirkstall ward.
Good evening, Councillor Jim McKenna from the Army ward.
Good evening, everybody. Councillor Caroline Bruin from Bramley and Stanningley ward.
Evening, I'm Lou Cunningham, one of the Army ward councillors.
I'm Councillor Fiona Venner from Kirkstall ward. Are you not going to introduce us? Just councillors. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Kat, a local resident of Armley.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Councillor Kevin Ritchie, Bramley and Stanningley ward.
Do you just want to, sorry, Joe, do you just want to put your mic, do that again with your microphone on? Oh, is it not working? Apologies. Sorry.
Hi, Steve McBarron, Co-operative Bramley and Stanningley.
Polly Kirk, Chief Officer of Sustainable Energy and Air Quality for Leeds City Council.
My name's Susan Butler and I'm Bramley and Stanley as well.
Good evening, Inspector Philip Gill from Leeds West Neighbourhood Policing Team.
Good evening, Liz Jarmin, Head of Localities Partnerships Team.
Good evening, Kenzie Thornton, Engagement Support Officer for the Inner West.
Good evening, I'm Jeremy Alone, I'm from Highways and Transportation.
Hi everyone, I'm Karen McManus, a Localities Officer for the Inner West.
Okay, thank you everybody. I'm now going to move on to the agenda. So can I ask Debbie as clerk to the committee to go through agenda items numbers 1 to 5, please?
Thank you, Chair. Under agenda item 1, there are no appeals against the refusal of inspection of documents. Agenda item 2, there are no items which require the exclusion of the press or the public. Agenda item 3, there are no late items of business. Agenda item 4, could I ask members to declare any interests? I'll take silence as there are none. Under agenda item 5, apologies have been received from councillors Bithell and Smart, and also the co-opted member for Kirkstall, Steve Harris. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. So now in accordance with agenda item 6 on the agenda, this is the open forum. And at this point in proceedings, in accordance with the Community Committee procedure rules, I would ask if members of the public wish to speak. I don't think we do have any members of the public present who have indicated they wanted to speak. And I don't think we've had anybody come in late. No, okay. Thank you. Okay, so we can move on to agenda item 7, which are the minutes of the last meeting, which was held on the 15th of September this year. The meeting minutes are in your agenda pack. So do members accept these minutes are a true and correct record of that meeting? We do? Okay, thank you. So we've adopted the minutes, and agenda item A are matters arising from the minutes. I have one thing to raise, but I will wait and ask members if they have any matters arising from the minutes they want to raise. Okay, if I can just raise the item I wanted to just very quickly raise. It's regarding the venue of the meeting, which is a discussion we had at the last meeting, obviously we're at the Civic Hall. When we have the meetings here, we can webcast the meetings, which makes the meetings accessible to members of the public who can't make it to the meeting. However, if we have the meeting in the Inner West, which we should do, we can't webcast the meeting, and that is the debate that we had at the last meeting. So we're here today webcasting the meeting, but I would like to make the suggestion that for the next meeting in March, we do move back to the Inner West. It does mean that we can't webcast the meeting, but it's not just us that are having that problem. It's all community committees are having this issue at the moment. And I know that the communities team are looking into a way to resolve that, so that when we do go into our venues in our communities, all 10 community committees, that we can do that eventually. But I think it's important from my perspective that we move back to the Inner West, but I'll be happy to take comments from members on their views on that for the March meeting. Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Chair. I fully support that proposal. I do think community meetings should be held in the community. It'd be great if we could record them and then post them later. Perhaps, I don't think we got a lot of interaction on the webcast last time. I know these things take time to grow, but I do think it's the right decision, which I welcome. So thank you.
Councillor Gruen.
I fully support that point of view. I think we should go back into the community.
Okay, I can see lots of nods from elected members in the room. So we will we'll move the March meeting back to the Inner West, and we'll keep working with the communities team on finding a solution to be able to meet in the community and also webcast at the same time. So we will we'll look for a venue in the Inner West for the March meeting, and we'll all meet there for that meeting. Thank you, everybody. Moving on, before we take agenda item 9, which is Polly, who's come to talk to us about the climate emergency update, Inspector Gill is joining us from the Inner West, and I know he does need to leave, obviously as a police officer has urgent business to attend to as usual. So I'm going to bring Inspector Gill in now to do his update for us, and then when he needs to leave, he can leave the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everybody. As I introduced myself at the beginning, Phil Gill, the MPT Inspector for both Inner West and Outer West. I'll start off by discussing changing supervisors which will affect the wards. We recently had Carl Robinson move on from the Bramley ward. His current replacement is an officer called Dan Bell, who's only doing it temporarily. We have advertised a role, and that advertisement will end on Sunday. So I'm hoping by the new year we will have a new sergeant in place, and I will share that with all the elected members, and that will be visible on the internet. So that's just in terms of our staffing numbers. Our staffing changes. Moving on to each ward then. So if we talk about the Armley ward to start with, there's currently some work ongoing still on Town Street in relation to the street drinking, antisocial behaviour and homelessness, where we've had the extension to the closure order extended. We applied for that in October, so that will last till January. It was first brought in May. Sorry, no, it started in July. It was the first in the whole country, I believe to be the first in the whole country, where it covered such a vast area. Normally, they are done on a particular property. This is a large open space, and I believe it's been met with some great success, resulting in a number of people being arrested and put before the courts. So that's been extended till January, so we will continue to enforce that. Part of that work, we've been doing work targeting local businesses. One example is working with trading standards, where we seized over £35,000 worth of illicit tobaccos, which is obviously linked to criminality. We've also done a number of drugs warrants in the area. And, you know, we've certainly done in the last couple of months a number of warrants and seized in excess of £800,000 for drugs. So that's no doubt making a positive impact on the local area. We have had a number of issues raised very recently. This morning, by example, on the Paisleys, we executed 3 warrants that we obtained from the magistrates following intelligence raised either directly from the local community or through the elected members. And as a result of that, we've recovered 2 large bags of what's believed to be spice, and also recovered 2 weapons, 2 knives, which have been removed, and 2 people have been arrested and been dealt with today. So that's through community intelligence. So I'm pleased to encourage the community to continue to report things that they don't believe should be happening in their communities, and we will take action. So that's it for the Armley area. If we move on to Bramley, we've had some good work alongside partners, including Barker down at the shopping centre. That continues to be one of our priorities. It seems to be attracting antisocial behaviour with young people down there. However, I'm pleased to report that obviously we've just come past a bonfire period, which is no doubt one of our riskiest periods of the year. This isn't just for Bramley, this is for all the 3 wards. And although it clearly wasn't perfect, because one call is one call too many, we've seen a significant reduction both compared to last year's calls, but more importantly, pre-COVID, so 2019, to those figures as well. So I think that's some real good piece of work. That was through working with partners, setting up initiatives, whether it was with a cleaner neighbourhoods team, so getting out there if we're identifying locations where they're setting up fires that shouldn't be getting set up, getting them removed straight away, where it's going around with the antisocial behaviour team and visiting youths or people we believe are going to be involved and giving them that warning, the potential actions that they could face, or whether it's working with New Work Community Centre with some of the projects down there, and getting some young people involved in their projects. So I'm pleased that we've had, in my opinion, hopefully you agree, a real successful bonfire period. So that's I did a off tangent there. So that's overall. Traffic in Bramley continues to be a priority. This morning we were in the Rossfield area, and a great example. Whilst we was down there, there's a vehicle that was speeding that one of the residents was about to complain about, along with the elected members. And thankfully for me, the police were there and was taking positive action. And then if we move on to Kirkstall, our main focus continues to be down at Cardigan Fields, and issues we're getting down there. Clearly coming up to the Christmas period and the shops are going to be busy. The footfall down there will increase, so we're mindful of the increase in theft from shop and theft from person. So we'll continue to deploy down there. We do have issues with bikes getting stolen down there as well, so that will continue to be a priority down there. Our 3 priorities for each ward at the minute in Armley, it's the issues on Town Street, drug dealing across the ward, and road safety. In Bramley, it's antisocial vehicle use, nuisance use down at the shopping centre, and issues with off-road bike. And then in Kirkstall, theft of motor vehicles, mainly motorbikes, and where the target is burglaries to get those vehicles, including the prevention of those offences, antisocial behaviour in terms of vehicle use, and antisocial behaviour in terms of Kirkstall retail park. And what I will ask is that at least one of those priorities should be a community priority. So if anybody's got any ideas what they want those priorities to be, then please raise them with me. Not necessarily today, but report them back to me, and we can mirror those priorities. Because sometimes, and historically, I think the police said these are what your priorities are, which isn't always the case of what the public want. So please, if you've got any ideas, then bring them to my attention. I have got some details on crimes. I won't go through every single one of them, but I've compared the crimes both to, this is from the 1st of April until the 31st of October for this year. But I've compared them not only to last year, because as we all agree that COVID has had an impact with crime, some positive impact and some not so positive impact. So I've also got the crime data for the year before. In terms of, and I obviously haven't got every crime type because there's plenty, but the ones that people want to know about in Armley, the key ones for me, we've seen a reduction in burglaries at residential properties, 83 compared to where we were in 2019, where we had 166, so that's almost halved. Last year we had 115, so reductions on that from last year. Robberies, we had 39 in 2019, 30 in our COVID year last year, and 32 so far this year, so reduction there. And then our theft from motor vehicle, we had 102 in 2019, 39 only last year in COVID, and then 71 so far this year. So we've seen significant reductions across the board there. And then in our antisocial behaviour, so far, we have had 341 calls compared to 594 last year and 416 the year before. So some reductions there. If we move on to Bramley, again, it makes good reading. If we look at our residential burglars again, we've had 77 so far this year compared to only 47 last year, which obviously was the COVID year, but 125 the year before. Some significant issues there. Robbery, we've had 10 so far this year in comparison to 12 so far last year, but the same period in 2019 we've had 18. So again, some good reductions there. And then the last one, theft of motor vehicle, we've had 34 this year. We had exactly the same this time last year, and then 46 the year before. However, in terms of criminal damage, we have gone up, unfortunately. So far this year, we've had 238 compared to 219 last year and 200 in 2019. So criminal damage is clearly the crime that we need to focus on as well. In terms of antisocial behaviour, we've had a total of 253 calls this year compared to 342 last year and 257 in 2019. So much less than last year, pretty much similar to the year before. And then lastly, I'll move on to Kirkstall. Pleased to report again in terms of our burglary, we've seen reductions. We've had 81 this year compared to 85 last year and 157 in 2019. Theft from motor vehicles, we've seen 65 this year in comparison to 74 last year and 92 in 2019. So some significant reductions there. However, robbery, we're at 28 so far this year, which is double last year, where it was 14, and then one more than the year before, where it was 27, so pretty similar there. However, obviously up much from last year. And then theft of motor vehicle, we're at 44 this year in comparison to 28 last year, but 41 in the pre-COVID year there. And our antisocial behaviour figures in the Kirkstall ward are 224 so far this year in comparison to 386 and then 239 in 2019, so a bit of an improvement there. So overall, certainly in terms of antisocial behaviour, it's going in the right direction. We are going down a lot of crime areas. However, there's still a lot of work to do because one burglary is one burglary too many. One robbery is one robbery too many. And by no means am I sitting here today thinking our work's done. We've still got plenty to do. Now, and that's my update. I will welcome any questions.
Okay, thank you, Inspector Gill. I can see a lot of hands going up. I've got Councillor Bennett and then Councillor Cunningham to start with.
Thank you, Phil. One of the things you were asking about community priorities, we all get loads of complaints about speeding. And at one point, Nathan Goodwin, who's fantastic, we really like working with Nathan, he suggested that he did like an exercise in part of the ward where police officers stopped quite a lot of cars and issued tickets to people that were speeding with the handheld cameras. It was partly to address speeding, but they also said it was a way of disrupting crime moving through the area, in particularly county lines. But he told us in advance, he told us not to publicise it in advance, obviously, but told us which area was going to be covered, and then reported back to us on how many tickets have been issued. And we then put that on all the community Facebook pages for that area. And it was really well received, and we got people to suggest other areas to do that in future. I don't think it's happened since though, and I think that's just because resources have been needed elsewhere, but it's really effective in that it's an issue that gets raised with us all the time, like in all our wards, but also being able to actually say, this is what we did, this is where we did it, this is how many tickets we issued. I think it's really good community, I think it's really good publicity for you and for the councillors.
Yeah, I don't disagree in terms of priority for traffic. pretty much out of, as I said, I cover both inner and outer, and out of my 6 wards, at least 5 of them have got it as a priority in our top 3. I know that other elected members, certainly even in this room, have said that to us before around, we told you the location, and if you can go away and return that result. So we do it. I won't say we're perfect at it. As much as it's a priority, it's not always a priority in terms of we come on and, if there's a report of a large scale fight, then traffic is often our first thing that goes because it's not something that's having a massive impact that day. I appreciate long term it does. So yeah, it's certainly something we do need to improve on. I think we have made some massive improvements over the last 12 or 18 months, but there's still work to do. Just things like getting the amount of staff that we've got trained on the Pro Laser, which is in what you're calling the speed gun. Because we have a turnaround of staff, those staff that we come in aren't trained. So then we have to go for it all again, and we're training them up, we're losing them. But it's something that we continue to do. We didn't even have a speed gun for ourselves. We shared it with Northwest, but now we've got a zone. So now we don't have to share it. So we've got a zone readily available. So hopefully we can start to do more of that. In terms of publicising the results, social media for me has got some very good points and some not so good points, because for every comment you'll get around thanks for that, you get negative comments around and you got all better to do, and don't bother me. I'm not bothered around those that are making those comments. They're clearly, road safety is really important, isn't it? I'm happy to share that. So I think what Nathan's done before, it's something we've done certainly in Bramley with Councillor Rich, and I know come up and say that we have done it, but it needs to improve, and I agree with that. So if you share those locations with us, and clearly we're not going to say to you tomorrow night we're going to be on Smith Street, but if you give us the locations and then we report back to you at the tasking meeting, if we went to these locations at these times and give you these results, then I think it's certainly something we need to be doing better.
Councillor Cunningham.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Inspector. Yeah, just on that point, we actually in Armley did some community safety days as well, where we did involve the community and we used the SIDS, and they were again quite effective because it did get people involved, and it was monitoring speeds as well as giving some education. But my question was around the work on the pays list today. So just to say that I've already had quite a few residents get in touch to say thank you, that they really appreciate that work that was done between you and our antisocial behaviour teams. Some of them who've got back in touch with me have heard about it, but they've heard about it via social media, but they were just asking could they have it in a kind of press release form so I could share it with them as well. Thank you.
Yes, I'll speak to our press officer tomorrow. Sergeant Craven wanted to do his own press release today, but I stopped him from doing that because it needs to go through the correct channels. But yeah, we'll get that. I can get that sent to you tomorrow.
Thank you. And just to say once again, thank you so much to you and your team for that response. We really appreciate it.
No, thank you. And as I said in the report earlier, it's unfortunately we don't just have the power to go putting doors through willy-nilly. We do rely on community intelligence, and I do understand how frustrated sometimes the community get with things, but I think sometimes they presume we know something, but we rely on intelligence. So there's no such thing as too much intelligence. So my big plea is encourage people to report it. They've got Crime Stoppers that come straight through to us. I know they've got 101, and sometimes people get frustrated with 101, but they've also got yourselves as elected members that can send it to you guys. You can anonymise it and send it to us, or they can come direct to the mailbox, which the mailbox, obviously the email mailbox, it's not, there's not somebody monitoring it 24/7, but it is read daily, and then that can go in as intelligence report, because we can't just go and put somebody's door through and execute a warrant based on one piece of intelligence, but 2 or 3, and we're getting somewhere near, or that one piece of intelligence can lead to us allocating a piece to go develop it, and then we can get some more intelligence. So we're really doing, most of our work is we are intelligence led, and that intelligence comes from the community. But going like today, we've had COVID, which is, I know it's had a real impact on us all in terms of like our community engagement, but going to the event in Bramley today, going and knocking on doors, that gives a real opportunity to that public to come forward, because we're going to them. So, it's something we're definitely doing more of now that, hopefully, I know COVID's not over, we need to make sure things are in place, but, less restrictions.
Okay, Councillor Gruen.
Thank you. Just on that last point, I know that it's possible to report something anonymously, which obviously most people would choose to do. But the truth of the matter is that most people feel, even with an anonymous report, that the person will guess who's reported it and possibly guess correctly, or even worse, guess incorrectly. And then that person will become a target. And indeed, we were talking around such a case today on the Ross Fields, actually, after you'd left. And there doesn't, you know, when I think about the behaviour that some people can get away with, i.e. a drugs den where people are frequently taking drugs from all over the area, and that's quite understandably upsetting neighbours. There's something missing from the system. I don't just mean the police system, when that can carry on and we can all carry on saying we haven't got enough evidence to either evict or arrest. It's you know, we need to think about plugging that system somehow, because it's unbelievable what people can get away with.
I don't understand your point around people maybe being reluctant because, you know, do you want to be seen as the grass on the estate? You know, why would you put your head above the water and be the one that potentially could get targeted? But what happens with our intelligence gets assessed so that we can try and stop that from happening. So part of the intelligence report would be, how does this person know this about this? So if it's Caroline ringing up to say that her neighbour John's got a gun in his cupboard, well, how does Caroline know that? Because Caroline's been to his address. Does anybody else go there? No. Well, it won't take the neighbour much to work out that Caroline came to visit yesterday and is being the one that's telling tales and put forward. But then if it's, well, everyone on the estate knows that John's got a gun under his bed, then that's how we can manage it. Now, sometimes, for instance, with a gun, we would have to act, but then we would put things in place to prevent that retribution taking place against that person it's come from. In terms of plugging that gap, we do rely on evidence, don't we? Unfortunately, our threshold is, you know, beyond reasonable doubt. You know, so it's pretty much got to be certain. Whereas the evidential threshold for like some cases is on the balance of probability, so 51% likely. But evidence, you know, there is other ways to get evidence. So we had a meeting the other day around an issue in Bramley where two people are targeting somebody, but that person who's vulnerable don't want to come forward. So how do we target those other people? So it's getting evidence from myself as the local inspector, from maybe yourself as the council, because you've heard about it. So not naming that victim directly. So there's other ways to plug it, but ultimately we do need evidence, and that's a law, isn't it? I don't know, you're not expecting me to change. That's a law, isn't it? Because we need evidence to prove things.
Councillor Illingworth, I do next.
Yes, there's two crimes that get mentioned to me most often, and one of them is trivial end. It's graffiti and spray painting. It'd be good to catch somebody. We have our detection rate is very, very poor, and it might concentrate minds if we're able to catch one or two, either by honeypot traps or some. Because I noticed if you clear an area of wall, it get painted over the following night, and you know, it's good target for a camera. The other thing is computer fraud, where you sit down to work at home and you've got several suspect calls a day, in my case, and it's probably reporting them. I don't know if I can feed this. It's not a local issue, but it would be possible for people to summarise their report and submit it electronically, and it's an electronic crime in the first place. It could smooth it up and spot dodgy telephone numbers almost instantly and close them down or raid them.
In terms of the graffiti, and you know, the trivial, it may be. I agree it couldn't be seen as trivial, but to that person that's the victim of it, it's not trivial, is it?
No.
And I know you're not saying that, but I know that people might think that that's my perception. It's like what's classed as minor ASB outside my grandma's address might not be particularly important to PC Smith, but to my grandma, who was 87 and vulnerable, it's really important. So yes, it might not be the priority, but like you say, it's really difficult to catch. And do we, you know, you say, well, that wall over there always gets graffiti on it. Well, if we're going to go watch it, we've got to get what's called a ripper, and that's got to get a superintendent's authority. And then we've got to staff it, and that's like 2 staff at 8 hours each. You're talking about
Yeah.
top of your head, 500 quid to not catch anybody. And then it's just, where do we want the public, where do we want the priorities to be? And I really get the need to catch the graffiti people, but would the public rather me have 2 people watching that walk's going to get graffitied, or 2 people on patrol try to stop burglars in a certain area? And I know from what my focus, I know it's not necessarily my priority, but I think people would rather prevent the burglaries. I'm not saying we don't want to do it about the damage. I'm not saying that, but it's a grand scheme of things. We ain't really got people just go watch a. If it's happening every single day, then I get we could look at it. But I know it happens a lot. But you're right. Maybe it's look at CCTV. That's potentially one of the things. In terms of computer fraud, I know the priorities for the police are getting looked at by the new deputy mayor. I know that fraud's definitely on the agenda. We've got action fraud, which is the main thing for fraud, but I think that's getting looked at. Nationally, is that the right tool? Because police not say we don't have anything to do with fraud, because we do, but a lot of the frauds go to action fraud, where historically they used to come to police. So maybe that's something that may or may not change in the future. But I know they're looking at action fraud to see what the best approach, because fraud is clearly, it's not necessarily visible, is it? But it's clearly one thing that's up and coming. I know that used to be on what was the PCC's agenda previously was fraud, and I don't know what the priorities are going to be moving forward with the new mayor, but I dare say fraud may be on there.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions for Inspector Gill? No? Okay, well, thank you for attending and thank you for your update. Obviously, I know you have things to do, so please feel free to leave the meeting whenever you need to, but thank you for coming along and giving us that update.
No, thank you. And like I said at the beginning, if anybody does come up with a question after this, obviously I'm going shortly, but I know that certainly elected members have all got my email address. Please send it through to me. And if I don't know the answer, I'll at least try and get it from someone who does know the answer. But no, thank you and good evening.
Thank you. Thanks. Okay, so we will move on now to agenda item 9, which is Polly and the climate emergency update, but linking that to the Inner West and what's happening in the Inner West. So, and we had a very good chat on Monday as well about a few climate things. So I'm very much looking forward to this. So I will hand over to Polly Cook, who's going to give us that update now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So like you said, I'm going to try and keep it very locally focused. So I am going to share my screen, but I've got a much longer presentation. But what I've done at other community committees is just focus on the first couple of slides, which is more about the local aspect, and then take questions. So we get more of a kind of interactive discussion, if that's okay. Let me just see if I can get full screen. There we go. So really, there's been, I suppose, 3 key things that are happening in local areas. So as lots of you will already know, we bid for grant funding earlier this year and managed to secure £25 million, which was specifically for our own corporate estates and also for primary schools. And it was about decarbonising them. So taking away the gas heating in most cases, putting solar panels in and putting LED lighting. The way that funding came out, it was quite a kind of last minute announcement, quite short timescales to bid for it. And that meant that there wasn't much consultation beforehand. It was just finding buildings that were suitable because it was done on a first come, first served basis. So the 4 sites within your community area that fell into the right criteria and we could manage to deliver within those timescales were Valley View Primary School, Hollybush Primary School, and I've got a lovely photo of Hollybush's solar, which is our favourite one, I think, from the whole scheme. And also Hawksworth Wood Children's Centre, and then Kirkstall Leisure Centre, which if anyone's been past Kirkstall at the moment, the scaffolding's up and the solar panels are going on. And the way that we've done all of these schemes is to balance the energy bills, so the air source heat pumps use electricity rather than gas and actually do start to push the energy bills up. So what we've done is we've used the solar to offset that, to make sure that no primary school ends up in a worse position and that they actually end up with some element of financial saving, and the same across our own corporate estate. So that's kind of a high level view of what we've done. We have submitted another bid for funding, but we don't know the outcome of that yet, and we are looking to see how we can do this on a more planned, longer term basis, and how we can bring the funding in, because at the moment we're very, very reliant on grant funding to deliver these schemes. The second one, again, we have bid for grant funding and been successful. And one of the things we're able to offer, and really this is an ask if you can promote this with your own local residents, is free solar panels or installation to people in a household with under 30,000 income. It's quite a challenging criteria because you need to be the homeowner still with under 30,000 income, but we have managed to find people in that situation. And also, you know, you may be capital rich because you own the asset, but may not have income coming in, and you would still qualify for that. The house has to be of a certain criteria, because obviously the government's trying to upgrade the worst housing from an energy efficiency point of view. But if you make contact on that, then we can do all that assessment for you at no risk or charge to the tenant. But obviously it's just a way to help people with their energy bills going forward. And the third area is really around the electric vehicle trials. So for the last about year and a half, we've been running an electric van scheme. So we have the vans, and we are basically letting businesses trial the vans, and also taxi drivers trial electric vehicles for a couple of months to see whether they work for them. And so it just takes away the challenge in terms of that, you know, try before you buy. And again, we've had, I think, 3 businesses from within your area that have completed that trial, 2 from Armley and 1 from Bramley and Stanningley. And the other part of that is we also have a charge point scheme that's happening. So we've got Armley Leisure Centre, Kirkstall Leisure Centre and Asda in Kirkstall have all benefited from the rapid charge points that have been installed. And I will just say that they're not the only charge points in the area. And if people want to look at that map, there will be plenty of other charge points. These are just the ones that have been installed under the joint working with West Yorkshire Combined Authority and us. So they're kind of the 3 schemes with some of the local elements. So I suppose our ask from yourselves is helping us to promote the kind of installation solar PV. We also have a free electric bike trial scheme. So it's similar to the electric van, but this is very much for residents. So if people are commuting and making regular journeys, you know, an electric bike is quite a big initial investment. Again, we're just trying to take that risk away from people so they can try it and see what it's like for a month and get a proper feel for it. And then obviously make that choice whether it works for them. So that's something else that would be good if you would like to promote amongst residents. We also, this week, the White Rose Forest scheme is launching. So the White Rose Forest scheme is run at a regional level. It's not specific to Leeds, but Leeds falls within the catchment of it. So the wider scheme is launching, and we are looking, so we've already got out the sort of parks and countryside and the tree planting that's happening on our own land, but this is looking for land beyond the council's estate. So if there are businesses or landowners or anybody that you're working with who's interested in that, again, just an ask to put them in touch with us, and we can marry them up potentially with different funding streams for actually undertaking tree planting. We do a lot of communication, and lots of we have so many projects and schemes going on all the time, but quite often people say we don't know what's happening. So again, we have the Leeds Climate newsletter that comes out monthly. So obviously as councillors we can add people on if they want to, but obviously residents as well. So we have over 5,000 people currently registered on that, and it's not just about what the council does. It's about what the city's doing. It's showcasing what some businesses are doing. It's allowing business to business learning. So if people are doing things that are innovative, it's allowing others to learn. And then the kind of final thing is around, so anybody who was on the Climate Emergency Advisory Committee will have heard about this, but Leeds DEC are a third sector within the city, and they're doing 2 key things. So one, if we've got councillors or people who are parents or residents within certain links with certain schools, they are producing climate specific curriculum material. And the big advantage of the material that they produce, it isn't a standalone. You don't have to have a special hour to do it. They've got material for a maths lesson or a modern languages lesson at the different key stages. So it's a really great way to try and integrate climate learning within the curriculum, which is one of the asks that we quite often get from different resident and environmental groups across the city. And that material is available free of charge. So it's something that we can promote as a council. And then the other side that they're doing is they're also looking within Seacroft to do some community climate action training as an area. And really, it's just an ask to the client, to the community committee, whether there is interest in that as an area. So what they're doing within Seacroft is bringing together different groups, so third sector groups, schools, businesses and councillors, and actually carrying out that training collectively and looking at climate action planning collectively. So with that, there is a cost associated with it, but it's something whether as a community committee be interested in looking into or exploring more. So Seacroft is acting as the pilot for that at the moment, and they've funded that. But it's really just, again, to raise awareness of that, because it's an opportunity, I suppose, to raise the profile of the climate across your 3 ward areas. So I can stop there. I have lots of other slides that tell you about the importance of housing and transport and the different kind of pros and cons and things and what we're doing more generically. But I am really conscious that these committees are always really busy and have a lot of time, you know, and people have heard some of that generic stuff at other events. So if I stop there and let you ask questions.
Okay, yeah, we'll pause there, and then we can ask questions, obviously relating to the Inner West. So Councillor Gruen, I've got you first.
2 questions, Polly. Thank you very much for the presentation. On those slides, there was a list of very valuable, very useful, very interesting activities, which clearly will help reduce the climate situation. I'm always interested when I look at those things, what their relative value is in terms of how much impact they're having. So what would you say would be, I know you can't be exact, but I mean, what kind of scale and proportion are we looking at in terms of the impact of those activities collectively? And then I've got a much more straightforward question.
That is indeed a very challenging question. I mean, if I know the figures for the first one, so the first, you know, the 4 buildings, which was the public sector decarbonisation scheme. I think we're doing 40 buildings across the city. From memory, I think it's about 3,000 tonnes of carbon saving. And I think we're about 70,000 as a council, but obviously that's the council, not as the city. So, you know, it's still a reasonable chunk of our carbon emissions as a city, or as a council. But all of those things on their own are fairly marginal. You know, it's not the housing stock. We have 56,000, I think it is, council housing. You know, we're probably dealing with sort of 4,000 or 5,000 of those, and that's not talking about the private sector housing. So everything we do is a little bit of a drop in the ocean, but we are doing multiple things. And, you know, I've not talked about the number of housing schemes we've got going on. And I think we're at the stage now in terms of the climate where we have trialed a lot. We've been at the leading edge of a lot of things that have happened, and we're now at the stage where it's the funding. We need to find out how we get the funding, not all through grant, looking at kind of private sector investment as well, and that we start to deliver at a more rapid scale. And we're doing a lot around sort of green jobs and skills, making sure we're getting the right people coming in, building up the supply chain. So we're doing a lot of that enabling at the moment, but I think the next sort of 8 years have got to be about how we start to deliver at a greater pace. And that is the big challenge. So it hasn't directly answered your question, but maybe gives you a flavour.
Well, thank you for that. But I do think it's time that we did a piece of work that's telling us how much good we're doing, so that we have an understanding about the mountain that's still left to climb, or otherwise. I think that's quite an important concept, because when you look through all these really good activities, you get the kind of feel good factor, and you think, oh, you know, we're on with the job. But actually, I suspect the impact of those collectively is probably a very small proportion of what we need to achieve. That's just in my head. The more straightforward question is, how did we identify the schools for involvement in the panel activity? If you said that and I've missed it, I apologise. I thought I was listening, but I'm a governor at Hollybush, and I was there the other day, and they asked me how they'd been identified, and I realised I didn't know.
Can I just add one thing to the last one? So every year we do an annual report to councils that goes in February, and in that we show what the changes are in the carbon emissions each year. So we have like an annual report showing the downward trend. So it wouldn't necessarily say it's this or that element, but it will show across different sectors in terms of where we get to. So that will come out in February. In terms of the schools, we, in consultation with Children's Services, primarily looking at schools, so either schools that were very, very proactive, and I'm not sure which which of these categories Hollybush fell into. So either schools that have been really proactive, been asking for things to happen, so were very easy to get into quickly because we were under time pressure, or the second category was schools where their heating system was at point of failure. And so they would have been getting help from children's services to do sort of gas boiler replacements. They either fell into one of those two categories.
Come back briefly, it would be a good idea to share that with the schools though, so they know why they're in the programme. I have a feeling it's a very proactive parent who's enthusiastic about it at Hollybush that would indicate they've been proactive.
Okay, I'm going to bring Councillor Ritchie in next. Is that a question? But could I just ask the ton of carbon that you're talking about? You're just talking about, is it 3,000 or 30,000? Did you say? Is that the big cube in City Square? Does that? Am I right in thinking that indicates what a ton, 1 ton of carbon looks like? So that's just 1 ton. There's a huge big square, big structure in City Square, and that's 1 ton of carbon. Is that right?
Yeah, so that's 1 ton. I think I said 3,000. So.
It just kind of puts it in perspective in my mind. Yeah. Sorry, Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Chair. My question, you did allude to some of the fantastic work that's been done with the housing stock. I mean, there's district heating, which I think has going into some of the Armley high rises, etc. I just wondered if you were doing any joint working with housing to look at those sort of, I suppose, ad hoc properties that don't fit a big scheme of, an estate, but may have been missed and not upgraded to central heating. And we find that we have a lot of problems, not just with the fuel bills for the resident and the obviously waste of carbon heating the properties, but also other issues around mould and what have you. Now, council housing does have a capital programme, and just putting a bit of sort of pressure on them to really focus on those properties which might just be dotted around the estates, I think would be helpful. So I wondered if you could look at doing that. And the second aspect is around a lot of our, again, amenity green space that sits on our estates, and some of it's been abused by Inspector Gill mentioned antisocial driving of quads and motorbikes and the tearing up these little green areas. Obviously we've gone down the route of putting fencing up, but that's really expensive, and we've suggested sort of green fencing, so with shrubbery which can stop access. Obviously there are climate benefits with that. Again, we generally have to fund these through our housing advisory panels, and that money is limited, so perhaps there might be grant funding to support schemes like that, if you're aware of that. Or again, is that something that you could again put some support housing engage, I suppose, even more so with that sort of climate change agenda? Thank you.
So we work really, really closely with Housing Leeds. So we do quite a few of the funding bids for them, because we tend to do funding bids across all the different tenures. Quite often they are for the bigger schemes rather than individual properties. However, I do know, I think in the last week, there's been an advert that's come out for exactly what you're describing in terms of housing that is off central heating systems. So if, we'll be picking that up with Housing Leeds, but also with private rented and the other tenures, because it's across all of them. So that might be quite timely, so we can certainly look at that. In terms of the green space, we actually have the SEAC working group for biodiversity, and we actually invited Housing Leeds along to that to look at how they're engaging and using the green space, and they took away some actions to work specifically actually with Councillor Ray on some of the challenges that he presented, and to look at how they work through that process. So I can come back, and I haven't had the kind of feedback from that yet, but I can come and feed that back to you yourself if that's helpful.
Thank you. Councillor Illingworth, you're next on my list.
Just the local emphasis that we were asked for. Just to say how thrilled to bits, I am thrilled to bits, is the right description with the scheme that Housing are running in Kirkstall, which is the ground source pumps at Queenswood Heights, Queenswood Court. It's a quality scheme, and everything you look at it, you find it's been well done. Good job made, good equipment, looks really promising. I gather it's the second one to be done. Heights, I think, was the first one in your neck of the woods, I guess.
It was the Westerlies, but
Yeah. But certainly,
I'm saying it was the Westerlies, but I understand the piping has been damaged and there's a problem with, so I don't know if it's susceptible to that type of thing.
well, we need to watch that sort of thing. But certainly, as far as Kirk's was concerned, it's early days yet. I am very, very pleased.
Fantastic. Thank you. Good feedback from Councillor Linworth. Any more questions to Polly on what's happening in the Inner West? Or indeed, if people have got wider questions around the city, I'm sure Polly will answer those as well. No, everyone fantastic, right? Well, thank you, Polly. There's some great schemes going on there. As we said, all 3 wards. We've got the heat pumps, the ground source pumps. Lots of work going on in all 3 wards to combat the climate emergency that we're in. So thank you for coming along and updating us on what we're doing. One thing I was going to ask is that the climate newsletter, you said that there was about 5,000 people signed up to it. Would you be able to share that with us in like a format we can put on social media so that we can put it in our community, Facebook groups, that kind of thing? And then maybe that would encourage people to sign up and, more people to sign up for the newsletter and find out what's happening on a regular basis. Would that be?
Yeah, I think we provide a link. If all the ward members are happy here, I can automatically add you onto that newsletter if people are happy for me to do that.
Yeah.
If you want to do that, that's fine. Yeah.
Sorry, yeah, Karen's writing the same notes, isn't it?
Okay, that's fine.
Just a very quick one, Polly. I'm sorry for leaving the late. My son doesn't drive. He's had all the lessons in the world from me when he was 17, but he doesn't drive. But he does cycle to work from Morley to Gipton, the fire station. He works for Health Watch. And it seemed, I was particularly intrigued with your offer of a trial for electric bikes. Is that still available? He's 43 now, so he's getting a bit old for cycling. Don't tell him I said that.
Too much information. I can send you through the details of that specific scheme for you. Yeah.
Actually, he's still running marathons, I like.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure your son will appreciate that's just gone out on the YouTube channel, Councillor McKenna. So that's a good interlude. Okay, thank you, Polly. That's great. A few actions there, but thank you for coming along. Right, if there's no more questions on the climate emergency, then we'll move on to agenda item 10, which is Jeremy, who has come to talk to us about the Highways Winter Service and what Highways will be doing to help us through the winter. So I'll hand over to Jeremy now.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you everybody for having me here today. What I would like to say is normally I've been really involved in this service in the development of a winter tracker, which is basically a tracking system that enables members of the public, elected members and so on, to track gritters throughout inclement weather conditions, so they know where they've been and what roads have been gritted and so on. So that's really my involvement up to date, but my intention here today as well is to give a bit of an overview of what the winter service is all about, what we do. If there are any operational questions afterwards, I'll try and answer them to the best of my ability. If not, I can take them down and I'll certainly be able to get back to you. As I say, my operations depot colleague is not available to attend tonight, who usually attends these meetings with me for those sort of specific questions. But if I go on and I'll just run through the demonstrations. Canon's kindly agreed to flick through as I go along. So if you could just flick through, Canon, that'd be great, and I'll give you the nod. So basically, Leeds City Council, we have a duty under the Highways Act in 1980 to do 3 main things during inclement weather, and that's gritting of the roads, refilling of salt bins, and snow ploughing and snow clearing. Okay. just to touch on that, basically, we do fulfill those obligations, and we actually fulfill those obligations, which is we do more than what our statutory duties are. So we're really pleased about that, but notwithstanding that there is plenty of room for improvement. Just a few facts of what we do during an average winter. Our gritters drive on an average of 51,200 miles during the winter period, which equates to driving around the circumference of the Earth twice. So they cover some quite significant mileage there. We use between 12,800 and 16,000 tons of salt a year. If you move on to the next one, we split our gritting routes. Now, this might be of particular interest to people. We split our gritting routes into general categories. I won't go through each one in great details, but I'll just sort of give you the sort of the headline topic. So we've got category 1A, and that's called the resilient networking group, and that's emergency routes leading to hospitals and major infrastructure services, the main roads basically. And then we've got the category 1 roads, which is more roads like the general roads that you'd use, bus routes, links to schools and so on. And then we've got the category 2 secondary salting network, and then medium to small business areas, shopping areas, doctors, surgeries and the like. And once we've covered all those those 3 category groups, then we move on to category 3, which is sort of the above and beyond, which is probably what most people are interested in, to be honest. It's the local streets, the smaller streets, the side roads and so on, which invariably we don't get round to doing because we simply do not have the resources to do that. But we do because the chaps that do drive the trucks, they're really committed to their jobs, and they get round their rounds as quickly as they possibly can so that they can get onto some of the smaller networks, but it's not a perfect system. If we were to grit every road in Leeds with the facilities that we've got at the moment, we'd have to grit every day of the year, including through June, July and August, which obviously there's no snow then. So we do have to sort of prioritise and categorise them accordingly. If you just move on, Karen. I'm sure a lot of members get queries from their constituents about as soon as the snow starts falling or it gets cold, is why ain't my road being gritted and so on. And looking at the review and the winter service, we want to sort of improve those lines of communication. And although this is a little bit small at the moment, it's designed as a sort of information leaflet type of thing. It's basically a flow chart to say what roads we do and why we do them, and what roads we don't do and why they don't do them. So that enable yourselves or say a constituent to look down the lines and say, right, do I live on a so-and-so road? Yes, well, yes, that'll get gritted. No, move on to the next one. Does it link to a school and so on? And it gives an example then and the rationale behind which roads are done and which roads aren't. So your guy living in a cul-de-sac is going to eventually work out the facts. He's going to get to it and think, well, no, I'm not on a primary network. It's unlikely that I'm going to be gritted, but I might do at some point. But I can see the rationale behind it. And that's something we can distribute out to elected members if you want on a one-pager, however you want to do it. We're hopefully going to embed it into our new website, and that's sort of work in progress at the moment. So I'm moving on. Another little bit of information about it. When we go out and do gritting, we don't just sort of like stick our finger in the air and think, oh, it's going to be a cold one tonight. We do have quite some sophisticated technology out there telling us where we need to go, because per gritting session on an evening, when we send the gritters out, it can be looking at excess of £10,000 per evening to go out and grit the roads, the primary network. So we don't want to send them out unnecessarily. So we do have some quite a few weather stations throughout the Leeds, namely Armley, Winmore, and so on, that does give us that ambient temperature and gives us a good forecast of whether they'll be needed or not. We also work closely with a Met weather forecasting company who also do long-term, short-term and medium-term weather forecasts for us, so we can prepare and get ready for inclement weather situations. All right, Karen, you can move on. The next thing I alluded to earlier, it's a gritting tracker. So we've developed this gritting tracker that's been a few years in the making, and it's one of the reasons why I was brought on board to help deliver this and get it put onto our website and get it operational for for the members of the public to use. We thought about why develop a tracker. It would give a good idea to residents in real life time. They'll be able to track gritters. They'll know if a gritter's been on the roads near them, if a gritter's due to be coming on the roads near them, and it'll help them make some informed decisions of whether they should travel or not. So say they were thinking about taking a trip down the A660, they could get the map up, put the postcode in, and it'd show you if a gritter's been up there recently within the last 24 hours. If it has, it would show a line showing that. And it also shows all the gritting networks as well, so people would be aware. So if you just click on to the next one, Karen, and this is the actual live gritter tracker. It's in demonstration mode at the moment, but I wondered, would you like to sort of see it a little bit in action? I'm conscious of time, but okay, Karen, if you kindly click on that blue live thing, it will take a little time because it's quite a big document to load. In real life, this should happen instantly when it's actually launched. It'll come up in a minute. You think it's gone, it just gets you, and you think, I'm going to go put the kettle on, and it gets you.
Well, I'd opened it thinking I could just go in there and click on it, but it's disappeared, so I'm going to have to click on the link again.
Yeah, if you just click on the link.
I was trying to be organised.
just while Karen does that, and to sort of take the pressure off you, Karen, sorry. That's sort of what you're presented with that you can see on the screen at the moment. And if you can see that yellow blob there, which what it looks like now on the screens, because it's not clear and we're not on it yet, that's a gritter toddling on down the road, doing his gritting job, doing his gritting. And some of the little dots there, you can see the yellow dots, those are actually green bins. It's not green bins, yellow bins with grit in them. So there's a few layers to this. So A, you can track a gritter. B, you can click where's my nearest grit bin. There's also the postcode search, so you can put in your postcode so you can zoom in on your area, see if there's a gritter going down your street anytime soon. Is it not working? Do you want me to have a quick look?
I think if I stop sharing and then, is that right? Yeah. Because my screen's too big, so I can't go back to.
Right, I see what you're saying.
So I'll have to stop sharing to open it and then go back in.
Okay then.
So keep
Okay.
talking.
All right, then I'll keep saying. I'll ad lib. Well, it has, to be honest, it has been a few years in the making, is this. And as I said, it does sound good on paper, but it is fairly new. And what we're doing, we're integrating a new technology with the council's old technology. So hence Karen's having a few difficulties now. So we're having a few difficulties merging the two. So it is launched and it is live and it is open to the public right now. But we do expect and we do want feedback, because it's not a perfect scenario. It's not a perfect system. This is a starter for 10. But the rationale with launching it now is to let's get it launched and let's see what the feedback is. But although the information is accurate, oh, that's brilliant, is that, Karen? Well done. So this is, as you log on, this is what you'll be presented with. So that's a map of Leeds. You can zoom out, Karen, to show the whole of Leeds. If you go out there, if you zoom out a little bit, that's brilliant. Obviously, that's it. You're really seeing all the massive grit bins there. But if you come out a little bit, Karen.
Out more.
Yes, please. If you just. No, sorry. Zoom in, zoom in, zoom in, zoom in. Yeah, it's difficult doing it third hand. Such a shame that I can't. I do a bit more, please. Yeah, keep going. Yeah, we are, aren't we? Okay, so what's that showing you there? It's showing you all the grit bins, and it's also showing you all the gritting routes. The different coloured routes are just for really our purposes, really. They're different routes for different operatives to do. So if you're looking at, there's no real significance in them. They're just mainly for our benefit and to just show that there are different gritting routes. So there'll be gritter A, will be doing the purple route, gritter B will be doing the blue route, and so on. What you would see there normally, right now, if it was a cold evening, you'd see you'd see a whole load of our gritters out there, and you would see there'd be a picture of a gritter and it refresh every couple of minutes, and you see it's moved along the road. And as it's moved along, it will make a different colour trail to where it's been. So you know where he's been and you know where he's going, hopefully. and there's a menu bar up at the top. Can you see the top one? I'm pointing at the screens if you can see. Right up at that, if you go right a bit, right on the, it's on the blue bar. Just go along again a bit more. See that? Like a stack of papers or a burger bar, they call it. That's it. Yeah. Have you clicked on that one?
Yeah, that's what this
Sorry.
is.
Yeah.
So
And if you declick those, sorry, and it takes the different layers off, so it makes it less busy. So you can say, right, I want to see gritting routes, I want to see grit bins, I want to see gritting routes, and so on. And if you just go up into the top left, can you see that like search bar with a postcode functionality thing?
Yeah.
Does anybody have a postcode they want to put in? Jonathan, what's your postcode?
LS13 2TB.
2TB.
If you, and there we go. And is that where you live, Jonathan?
Yeah.
Well, you can zoom in and out a bit more, and hopefully, if it was a cold, if you put the grit bins on, those are your grit bins near you. Those are the gritter routes near you. And if it was a cold day, or a cold evening, should I say, I'd like to think there'd be a couple of gritters around there doing their job, and you'd be able to know where they've been. So
Wow.
You'd be able to think, oh yeah, gritter's been down that road, I'm okay to drive on it. It should be ice free and pretty safe to do. Make an informed decision really whether to travel or not. So it's just sort of us moving with the times a little bit and trying to be a little bit more interactive, and hopefully we can reduce some of the questions that people ask through the contact centre, reduce contacts and so on, which sort of gives people information, but also cuts down on traffic, which through the call centre, which obviously saves time as well. Well, thanks for that, Karen. You've been an absolute genius on that. If you just click onto the last one, under pressure as well, and you've done a great job. You've got it to work. Some of the developers that did this couldn't do that. And sort of just to finish off, really, you know, we are sort of moving with the times. So we are starting to post a lot of things via our comms team on things like on social media, such as Facebook, Twitter, and so on. But we do have the normal avenues for people who maybe not don't use the internet and so on. So we do have the normal phone lines that are still open for people to ring up and say, oh, are the gritters coming down here? Are there any road blockages with snow or anything like that? Can I have a grit bin filled up and so on? So that's my presentation over. So if anybody's got any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Oh, right, lots of hands up again. I've got Councillor McKenna and Councillor Ritchie. Any other hands yet? Oh, and Councillor Cunningham. Okay.
Thank you, Jeremy. That was very interesting. And I'm sure when it's available, we'll be all checking on these things before we start our journeys, particularly on the cold morning. One thing I was wondering about, living in an area that's there's a lot of trees and there's a lot of leaves on the road and the pavements. Is there any type of liaison between yourself and environment to clear these leaves? Because in a bad snow or even a frost, these can be really very dangerous in conjunction with leaves, makes it very slippery and very difficult for people.
I take your point, and I do understand that is a problem. And from my old housing days, it was a major problem, was sort of leaves on the paths being very slippery, especially in areas where there's a lot of elderly people and so on. There isn't any specific system in place to sort of clear leaves up as and when. It's sort of classed as a natural phenomenon, really, and something that in an ideal world we would be able to clear a lot of them, and the parks and countryside people who do actually that job do get round to doing a lot of the areas of Leeds, but they just cannot do them all. In terms of working together for snow and leaf clearance sort of at the same time, that's a good question. I really don't know that one, and that's something that I can take back to my operational colleagues and ask that question. So if you don't mind, I'll make a note of that, and I will drop you a line, or I can feed the questions back through Karen and so on and what have you, and I'll get back to you with that one.
Okay, Councillor Ritchie, I had you next.
Yeah, I've got three things. So I was watching you do that, and having spent quite a significant proportion of the summer doing a grit bin survey in my ward and making this long list I was thinking, what a waste of time I've done. However, and this shows how sad I am, I suppose, when you put that map up there of the Broadleys, and I just saw the one on there, and so what that tells me, if that's up to date, is you're not necessarily mapping the housing bins that have been put on there. So there's one on Broadley Hill near the shops, for example. I won't go through them all, don't worry. Which I think is a housing one. And also we fund some ourselves through community committees, which I think are the blue ones or the green ones. So I'm not sure they're on there. So that's first point. The second point is during the summer, or if we have a mild winter, they end up solidifying. So I just wondered what were in place around that, so that I don't know if you then come to them, take that out, restock them or not, or if you just leave them as hard fill. Looking at some of them as I went round, that seemed to be the case. And then a more light-hearted question to finish. Have you thought about naming our gritters, especially when they're going to be on there? Because it was very popular, I think, Doncaster Council, when they were asking for suggestions. So a bit of a light-hearted one to finish off, but it might just spark some community interest.
Well, thank you, Council, for those questions. Yeah, great questions. You're right about the bins, and it was very astute of you to pick that up. We have only got mapped at the moment the yellow bins, the ones that highways and transportation pay for, monitor, repair, refill, and so on. We are, because as I said, this is work in progress at the moment, and we are looking to put on the blue bins that are funded by the community committees and any other grit bins that people want to put down, because we have a sense of responsibility to sort of oversee those and maintain them and help our colleagues that look after them and pay them. So that is work in progress, and soon, hopefully, by maybe I won't say this winter coming, but hopefully next winter, maybe they'll all be mapped, because there is a mapping process to do, and then we have to integrate with the IT people and so on and get it in. But all we had was we just had accurate locations of our own bins at the moment. So that's the information that we went with, that we could be sure of. But the blue bins are certainly on the agenda to be mapped, and any other secondary bins as well. So that's coming soon, hopefully. About the solidifying of the salt and so on, it's another good question, and it's something we don't really do. And I don't, from the time I've worked in highways, I've not really heard anybody mention that, but I'm thinking of my own blue grit being outside now, and that's solidified, because I checked it the other day, and I could imagine that breaking that up with a spade could be quite difficult, especially maybe if you've got disabilities or you're elderly and so on. They are periodically checked. I know the yellow ones are periodically checked for how full they are, and I know that every single yellow bin will have an annual check twice a year during inclement weather times. A, to check if it's okay, and B, to check if it's full, and then if it's not, they'll fill them up and so on. And if it's solidified or solid, I would like to think that the operative would note that down and request a new refill, and that to be done. But I will take that back to my my colleagues in the operations department and ask that question: what we do about solidified salt? Do we do anything? And maybe that's something that we can pick up and start doing in the future, because we don't know everything and we don't think of everything. So that's really good question, and really important that you raise that. So that's, now we know about it, we could possibly do something about it. So I'll certainly take that forward. Thank you. And about naming the gritters, I think that's a great idea. And we have, it is thought of, we have thought of doing that, and we do intend sometime we will be going around local schools to take some of the gritters out there and get the kids involved, tell them a bit about climate and so on, and a bit about what service we do and how we do it and what have you. And we are doing some competitions, and sort of winners of competitions would be looking at possibly naming gritters, like you say, some of the other local authorities do. And I think that's a great idea. So I don't really want to put anybody in the spot, but Can anybody think of a gritter they'd like? I'll start you for 10. I've got one that I thought of, and I'm going to take this one. I've got Britney Spears. That's mine. I'm having that one. So if anybody can get any better than that one, I'm sure you can. But we are certainly going to be doing that and having a competition with schools to see if they can name the gritters. But if anybody can think of any witty ones, the funnier the better, because we do want to make it light-hearted. And what we can do as well, because we have discussed this in our meetings, is it will say on that gritter, it will say like gritter number 1, Britney Spears is going down Meanwood Road, blah, 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 blah. Do you know what I mean? And it will say on the side of the truck, Britney Spears, sponsored by Leeds Council, community committees and so on like that. Just to have a little bit of, yeah, and hopefully it'll engage people and show that, you know, we're not just some, you know, local authority. We want to show that we have got a light-hearted side, or it's serious business we do, you know, and it's really important, the engagement side of it.
I was just thinking if you named them, maybe that would encourage people to get on and track, you know, track the, you know, they encourage people to watch the gritters and check their own locality. So yes, if anyone's got any ideas while we're sat here, stick your hand up and we'll take those names, definitely. Oh, I've just got Councillor Cunningham and then I'll take yourself, Councillor Gruen. Councillor Cunningham.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Jeremy. I think I'd go with Ice Baby.
Yeah, I think we'll have that one. That's a good one.
Yeah, so I've been doing some similar geekery to Councillor Ritchie, mapping our bins, and some of the things that I've been reporting in are kind of repairs like missing lids and things like that, and litter within them. So that's just you know, another point to take away. And one of the queries I had was around the tracking system, because at the moment we do have a tracking system with our refuse operatives, and we still sometimes find that when customers ring up, they say, oh, we've tracked and the refuse truck has been down your street, but the bins still haven't been collected. So I'd just be a bit concerned if we had any of those kind of lags or issues with this system, you know, that people might be relying on in terms of safety measures. And then my third point was just around some of the local authorities have started kind of gathering together community volunteers for like snow clearing and local gritting for kind of pathways and roads that might not be reached by our gritting system. Have we thought about any of that, of campaign of that sort as well? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, for the questions. Yeah, just on about the community side of it and volunteers. We do have a service called sort of like the Gritting Winter Champions that we have, and we're trying to promote. And a lot of it is done that via community committees as well, because normally when a blue bin is put into place, then we normally would like to say, right, we need a champion, because it's not a Leeds City Council asset, one of our highways one, although we will look after it, of course. We don't have anybody to monitor it because it's not one of our regular yellow bins. So we do ask for a community grit champion. So that champion is then sort of responsible, for want of a better word, to help out, grit and so on, help your next door neighbour, your elderly, get people involved and so on, and rally the troops in inclement weather, and to also report that the grit bin's empty, and so we can go around and refill it. But I think you're right. I think there's a lot more work to be done in terms of, in a wider sense, about let's get more residents and the people of Leeds on board and being gritting champions, because I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that do struggle to get out when it's deep snow, and probably neighbours, for whatever reason, haven't thought, or I felt it inappropriate to go and ask the neighbours if they want their paths gritting and so on, or their bins putting out during weather. And that's something we can certainly look at and maybe see if we can promote on our social media and website. And that's a great question, is that? Yeah. So that's something I'll take forward. With regards to the sort of like the security side of it and the tracking of it, I understand the pitfalls of it and people monitoring it and scrutinising it and saying the grit has been down our area, and and it's a great question, because some gritters, people will be able to track a gritter when it's not actually gritting. And it's something that we can't get around it. It's a technology thing, because what they'll be doing, they'll be going, say, from the Hunslet depot to where they're going to be gritting in Middleton. So they might be able to track that gritter going on the A61 up towards Middleton, but he won't be gritting, and the gritting won't be being spread because he's not got to the start of his route yet. That will be covered by another route. So some gritters have to cross other gritting routes to get to their route to start gritting. So somebody could say, well, I tracked the gritter. I even saw him blooming drive past and he wasn't gritting. And we're aware of that. And hopefully that it'll be minimal, but we are sort of prepared to field those sort of, not complaints, but queries really. And forgive me, I don't recall your first question. I've scribbled it down, but I can't read my own writing. Sorry. Yeah. I mean, in terms of the litter and so on, yeah, they are inspected a couple of times a year, and if they're damaged and maintained, they'll go back, and we'll get our operatives to come out and fix them and fill them up with grit and so on. We'd like to do it more often than we do, but it's on average probably 2 to 3 times a year we do that.
Okay, Councillor Gruen.
So it was just a question about, if I was monitoring my gritters and deciding which route to take into work, let's say, do the routes and the order in which the routes are done, would there always, how likely is there to be an alternative gritted route to my normal route?
Sorry, well, anyway, it's another good question, but it's sort of really, it's by chance. If I'm completely honest, it is by chance. We will, without a shadow of a doubt, grit every primary, secondary and third route. They will be done. They always are, and they've never not managed to do it. These guys get through all sorts of inclement weather, and those are covered. But when we go to the other routes that are the nice to do routes, for instance, there's no actual real mapping of those, and they're not prioritized. So if a gritter, if an operative has done his route and he's out on site and he's got the capacity to be able to grit more streets, he will do that, and he will do that sort of to his best ability and to how he sees which is the priority at that certain time. So it would be difficult if you lived in I presume you lived in a nice normal residential area. There'd be no way of knowing that we're number 10 down the pecking order there. Maybe that's something we can develop in the future, but as I said, it is fairly early doors, and it is a good question. It's something that I can take back to my colleagues.
It's just that the whole purpose of looking at it is to decide which way you're going in. So if there isn't an alternative way of going in, you see where I'm coming from.
I can't see where you're going from. The difficult, yeah. I mean, you'll be able to get into Leeds, but it's getting out your own street is the main issue. And that's the problem.
Yeah.
That is the main issue. And that's something that in a perfect world, we would be able to do every street. But hopefully we could encourage, and it links in nicely with the climate change stuff, hopefully during inclement weather, and it's snowing and so on, or really ice, and you can't get out of the street in your car, we'd like to think that you'd look on the tracker and say the main arterial routes into Leeds or into Meanwood or into Armley have been gritted. I can see that on there. They've been done in the last 24 hours, or I can see that there's a gritter on its way doing it. I'll nip out and I'll catch the bus into work this time as opposed to taking the car. It's about giving people an informed decision. It's not a perfect scenario at the moment, but we do hope to improve that and build on that, which is one of the reasons why we're coming out here, because we're getting some of these great questions here, and these are certainly things that we can take back and hopefully develop them and make the system better.
And I have thought of a name now. The kids will probably get it. Ice cream.
Ice cream. I'm making a note of these, because if you see it, you know it's you then.
Yeah.
Ice Queen, yeah.
I have a question, if I can, just talk about your nice to do routes. And I did wonder if Councillor Cunningham or Councillor Venner would ask this question. They know what I'm going to ask. I was waiting for one of you to bring it up. We recently went to see Caroline Criado Perez, who wrote Invisible Women, a book, Invisible Women, about how women's issues are left behind. You know, everything defaults to the male. And one of her examples is some snow clearing in Sweden. Now, what they used to do, and this relates to gritting, because obviously we have, you know, ours is mainly gritting, not as much snow clearing. But they always cleared the main artery routes, you know, arterial routes. Because it was mainly men who were setting those routes. So it was mainly men who decided which routes. It was men who was going out and doing the gritting and the snow clearing. So they kind of went and did the routes that they would use, okay? But when they looked at the amount of accidents that were taking place, it was more women who were having accidents, because what they found was that the routes that the women were using weren't the routes that were being cleared. Okay, so a woman might take a child to school, or they may have, and then go to work. So they're using maybe back, you know, these nice to do routes that, you know, you get to at the end of everything else. You know, so they were using routes like that, or they may have an elderly relative, because I'm not saying men don't do that, but it mainly falls to women still, unfortunately, to do that kind of work. So when they looked at it and they started to clear, I mean, and this is in very much a nutshell, this is a whole chapter of the book. And when they looked at this and they started clearing these other routes that they found women mainly use, the accident rate actually reduced of people going to hospital with accidents in the snow. So I'm interested in your gritting decision policy chart. If you'd send it through to me, I'd be very interested to, and I'm sure other colleagues would as well, to look at that. And we've already spoken to Councillor Hayden, because she was with us on the evening about this, but I'd just be interested to look at how you make that policy decision on the routes, and how that can be changed to you know, help. And I'm not just talking about women, I'm talking about, you know, maybe where we've got areas where people living who've got disabilities or elderly people, you know, and those routes that we don't always think of, because we're just thinking of main arterial routes that we always clear first. And actually it's beneficial to clear some other routes for us, you know, to reduce those accidents and the pressure in hospitals. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, thanks. Yeah, it's, yeah. I can really see the rationale behind it now. I really can see, because, yeah, about taking children to school, about looking after elderly, maybe yeah, that's where all the activity is. And it probably is a load of blokes in an office deciding which roads to do. And those were decided before my time, so I'm not taking any rap for that. And you're right, it probably is a lot. Yeah, and I'm sure, and well, I do know a lot of there is a lot of science behind which roads are done in terms of like ones leading to hospitals and schools and so on like that. But like you say, some of the other routes that could be used mainly by women. And if women are having more accidents, which is something I didn't know, and that's what it's all about, is coming to you and offering these suggestions so we can tailor our service to better represent what's going on out there. So that's fantastic. I've got a note of it, and I will take it back, and we will certainly have a look at it. And I think that's a great idea. And I
mean, I'm not saying it has to be done this winter. Obviously, no. It's a big piece of work. It's something to think of.
That was my next thing. It's probably not going to happen this winter.
No, but as long as it's
we'll
on the agenda. Best, yeah, absolutely. I've got Councillor Bennett, then Councillor.
I'd actually recommend you read the chapter of the book. It's really illuminating. It's the first chapter in the book, and it's called "Is Snow Plowing Sexist?" And it did start as a joke, actually, that it was a bit of an anti-woke conversation where someone was saying, "Oh, I bet you can find some. I bet you could even prove snow plowing was sexist if you really put your mind to it." And when it was researched, actually, as Councillor Hessel has said, it was demonstrated that primarily it was the commuting routes men took in and out of the city or town that were gritted, whereas women are more likely to. Whereas men tend to go in and out to work, women will go like to school, then to the shop, then to work, then to see an elderly relative on the way home, school run. Women make a lot more zigzaggy journeys. So transport planning generally favours people commuting in and out of work rather than people who make more journeys within their neighbourhoods. And so, as Councillor Hesselwood said, you were getting women falling on pavements in residential areas which weren't being gritted because the focus was on commuter routes. So I think you and your, I presume, predominantly male colleagues may benefit from reading this very illuminating chapter of Invisible Women. And I just want to say as well, thank you for such an enthusiastic presentation. It's really lovely when people come to us and they clearly really enjoy their work and are enthused when they're presenting. So thank you for such a, because actually potentially it's quite boring gritting, and you made it really interesting.
Oh, dear.
I mean, we've made this discussion interesting. I'm sure you weren't expecting Invisible Women to come up, but thank you for your presentation.
No, thank you so much. And yeah, in all the years that I've worked for Leeds City Council, I've never had a question like that I've just totally not been able to answer, or I ever thought of, and which is the beauty about coming out to these committees. It's been absolutely fantastic, and thanks for your feedback. And if you've got any feedback, if you could feed it back to Councillor Hayden, who is our exec member, I really would appreciate it. But thanks very much.
I've got Councillor Gruen and Councillor Ritchie, and I think we better move on. But I absolutely agree with Councillor Venner. This has been a really interesting presentation and interactive. And there's also a chapter about why there's no pockets in women's clothes, but that's another story. You need to read the whole book. You really do. Yeah. Councillor Gruen, then Councillor Ritchie.
Really short. I was just going to suggest the roles are reversed, and that Councillor Heselwood and Councillor Venner do some training for the highways people based on that book.
Why not? Maybe we could invite you to one of our training session days. If you're up for it, we are definitely. Yeah.
Councillor Ritchie, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. When you mentioned the Swedish author, I thought Swedish actor, Grit Eklund.
I'll take that one. Definitely will.
I didn't come prepared with that, by the way.
We've got
Brilliant.
Joe at the back. I think Joe might have another one.
Oh, they're coming in. There's going to be none left for the kids, isn't there now?
Fantastic. This has been a brilliant item on the agenda. I've never done it. It's so enthusiastic and with names and the interactive map and everything. So this has been fantastic. Thank you for your presentation and extremely enthusiastic. We do have to move on. I'm just conscious of time. Is there any last questions before we move on, or last names? No, excellent. Well, thank you everybody for your suggestions, for the gritters and all your questions. It's been a really good, really interesting presentation. So thank you for coming along.
And thanks for having me. Thank you.
Okay, right. Moving on to agenda item 11 is the finance report. So I'm going to ask Karen to present the finance report to us, please.
Thank you, Chair. I don't really want to follow Jeremy now, to be honest, but we'll give it a go. So if I can bring your attention to the finance report, which is agenda item 11, and it begins on page 19. So this report provides the Community Committee with an update on the budget position for the Wellbeing Fund, Youth Activity Fund, Capital Budget, as well as the Community Infrastructure Levy Budget for 2021-22. So if we can please start on paragraph 18. Members are asked to note a remaining Inner West Wellbeing budget of £103,638.73. And below that, table 1 provides a breakdown on all projects approved so far from this financial year. And at the bottom of that table, that shows the remaining balances per ward. So for the wellbeing budget for Armley, they currently have £49,054.26 remaining. Bramley and Stanley have £34,547.99, and Kirkstall have £20,036.48 remaining. So we can now move on to paragraph 20 on page 23, where members are asked to consider funding applications that have been received since the last meeting. The project summaries have been sent out to members prior to this meeting for you to look at. And please note the application, the first application, which I think is paragraph 20 for hookers and clickers, that application has now been withdrawn because when I spoke to to the organisation, I realised they weren't constituted yet, which means they're ineligible for funding, but I have referred them on for some support with that.
Karen, isn't Hookers and Clickers part of Kirkstall Valley Development Trust?
They didn't mention.
Oh, okay.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, are we okay? Yeah. So the first application to consider is paragraph 21, which is for the Inner West Pedal Cycle Security Project with West Yorkshire Police for 1,460, and that is for each Inner West ward for £487 each. And that will fund 500 Selector Mark products to register cycles on a database to reduce the amount of bike thefts across the Inner West. So shall I just assume as approved if nobody raises their hand? Yep.
Everyone in agreement? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. So the second project to be considered is on paragraph 22, and this is for the festive light motifs in Kirkstall at a cost of £4,548. This will fund 12 standard motifs and 6 wraparound motifs.
Kirkstall in agreement? Yep. Okay.
Thank you. So moving on to paragraph 23. Oh, Jeremy should have stayed for this one. This is for a new blue grit bin in the Kirkstall ward at Burley Hill Drive, which was a request received by yourself, Councillor Venner, so I will need to try and find a champion, but we can do that afterwards. This is just to get the funding approved for £177.22.
You can't say no now, Kirkstall. Okay, right.
Thank you. So the next project on paragraph 24 is for the Bramley ward for a project called Fairfield Urban Music Project at a cost of £2,100. The organisation, the Music Box, will work alongside Barker to identify young people at risk of antisocial behaviour and crime to deliver an urban music and art-based project with them. Yeah.
Councillor Richard.
Yeah, just a comment. I saw these you may have done as well, Councillor, as well, Councillor Gruen, at the summer festivals through the healthy holidays, and I thought what they put on were really great, engaging, and what have you. I did encourage them to put a bid in, and actually the value for money, 15 weeks, 12 young people, it's about £11.66 recurring a head. Not that I've had my calculator out. So I think it's good value as well. Just as ever, we do want them to go to children from our ward. So they need to work hard on that. So LS13 itself isn't enough. Some of that's in other wards. So really it needs to be postcodes from our ward. But yeah, so obviously I approve based on that.
Yeah, myself, we saw the work over the summer and it really is good. Okay. So yeah, that's a good project. Thank you.
So moving on to paragraph 25, Armley ward members are asked to consider funding of £8,482 towards the cost of the Winter Wonderland project, which will host a Christmas light switch on event organised by Armley Action Team. This amount that I've asked for now is slightly different to the project summary I originally sent and what's on the report, just because there's been a bit of an amendment, such as paying for the Leeds Light staff. So it has gone down slightly. So it's 8,482. Approved. Yeah. Thank you. Paragraph 26 is a funding request from Leeds City Council's project development team for £950 to run a course aimed at residents of Armley to learn DIY techniques and to upcycle furniture and clothing.
Yeah. Karen, with that, please could you ask them to contact us about days, because we've got quite a few community events going on particular days in the hub, so I wouldn't like them to clash. Thank you.
Thank you. So the next project on paragraph 27 is a request for funding to pay for the Christmas tree lights in Bramley, for the Christmas tree placed by Forestry, and the lights cost £444 for 30 metres, I think it is, for the 15-foot tree in Bramley.
Oh, Councillor Ritchie again.
Sorry to delay things. I do approve, but I believe from our community committee rep that they may have put the tree in the wrong place. We did agree that it'd be on Stockshill on Lower Town Street, so clearly visible from the road. And it appears to have been put closer to the shopping centre, which we don't want for a couple of reasons, really.
So it's already gone up?
Well, that's what I'm told. Yeah,
Right.
I was looking the wrong way, thinking where the Hummer is it? And then Steve told me it was.
I mean, just coming very briefly, Chair. Yes, it's been placed in the shopping centre at the bus station part of the shopping centre. It's there now. It's placed there today.
And is that the wrong location?
Well, yes, I didn't know that, but apparently so. Yes.
Could I ask Steve, is it our land it's been placed on, or the shopping centre's land?
It's in that flower bed that I think was funded by this committee that's at the bus station part, directly opposite the Bramley Elderly Action Shop.
That is definitely the wrong location. Yeah.
Yeah, I know when I came back, I saw there was quite a lot of exchanging with emails wanting to agree the location. So yeah, I'll have to pick that up with Matthew, which I'll do.
Yeah, if you can, because there's a lot of work going on
Because it was the road
around
works
that area, so
will-
we need the tree over the road. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Right, yeah, I'll take that up with Matthew. So moving on to paragraph 28, members are asked to note the projects that have been approved via the DDM process since the last meeting. And then moving on now to paragraph 34, members are asked to note there is a remaining youth activity fund budget of £35,078.09. And again, table 2 provides a detailed update of any projects already approved from this budget. And again, at the bottom of the table shows the remaining balances per ward. Armley has £14,624.02. Bramley and Stanley has £14,137.96, and Kirkstall has £6,317.08 remaining. Paragraph 35. Members are asked to note they currently have a remaining budget in their small grant and skips pot of £2,439.48, and table 3 and table 4 show all the projects and skips that have been funded from this pot so far. Moving on to paragraph 36, members are asked to note they currently have a remaining capital budget of £29,708.84 after a recent injection of £4,600. And in paragraph 37, members are asked to note their remaining SIL budget of £82,153.84. And again, table 5 provides details of projects approved from this budget so far. That's all from the finance report. Thank you, members.
Any further questions on the finance report? No, okay. Moving on then, Karen, we have agenda item 12, which is the Inner West Community Committee update report. If you can talk us through that, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So this report starts on page 31. So this report brings to members' attention an update of the work which the communities team and other services are engaged in based on priorities identified by the community committee. I did invite Inspector Gill to speak as part of this report, but obviously he did that earlier in the meeting. So I will assume the rest of the report is read unless members have any questions or comments.
Councillor Groom.
Is Liz here to address the issue about the children's summits?
I can respond to it if that'd be helpful. Yeah, I think an email. Well, I know an email's gone out through the chairs to the champions of each of the committees around the youth summits for this year. And we spoke at previous meetings, well, particularly the last meeting, about how we were, we really wanted to re-establish those in-person youth summits as soon as we can, and we'd really hope to do that really soon. And I know that yours was planned for, was it this month even, that it was planned for? Yeah. However, following some advice and guidance from Public Health, who have still got some grave concerns about bringing mass groups of young people together, and I know some correspondence has gone out around not having full school assemblies, and after talking to colleagues in children's services, we have taken that advice and decided to push those in-person youth summits into next year. We've also got a further issue that I think has been brought to your attention around some changes in staffing, and that unfortunately for us has meant that we've lost some expertise, which we're working with colleagues to look at how that gap's going to be, particularly from a safeguarding perspective, because bringing all these young people together is not as straightforward for us as a team as just putting them all on buses and bringing them into the civic hall or wherever it might be. There is a lot of safeguarding work that goes on behind to make sure that we've got all the right checks and balances in place. So as much as we'd like to start them soon, we have got some ongoing issues around restrictions and around making sure that we're keeping our young people and the wider public safe. From a COVID perspective, there is some resource gaps as well, that we're trying to work with our colleagues in children's services about how we can be supported around those issues. So I suppose what we're asking you to be is patient with us, and work with your locality officer for this year, to look at how we can still have some of those youth services, but maybe look at some different models of delivery. And I know that that's really frustrating, but I'm just being honest with you about where we are. Please be reassured that our ambition is to continue with the youth summits. We know what a special occasion they all are for you. And I've been to other committees, and the members there will speak about it being the highlight of their calendar. So please be reassured that our intention is not to not do the youth summits in the way that they were, but give us some time just to work through how we get to that position. But it is likely to be the next municipal year now, in all honesty.
Yeah.
Thanks, Liz. And I appreciate we've lost some expertise, and that's left a massive hole, particularly in this area. I don't think there's a plan to replace that expertise. So therefore, we've got a finite resource that we need to work with. My view would be that these are so important that they would need to take priority. We'd have to reprioritize to make these one of the things that is addressed. I'm talking about future years, and I accept about the children coming together from schools at the moment probably is a risk too far. I can accept that, but I wouldn't accept it next year. I couldn't support that position next year because I think they are too important. And I was going to suggest that if the Voice and Influence team have previously, it actually says in this report and in the email that we received, are concerned about their ability to support them going forward. Well, that, for me, that's an alarm bell. And I don't think we should accept them not going forward next year, Chair. I think if it was the case that the council couldn't deliver them, I would suggest using some wellbeing funding to commission Barker or somebody like that to do them. I'm not prepared to lose them from my perspective as the children's champion.
Okay, I know Councillor Venner wants to come in. It's probably on some of the points that you've raised,
Yeah,
Councillor Groom.
I've picked this up, as I said I would in my response email to you, because the Voice and Influence team is in my portfolio. I know this crosses portfolios because obviously it's communities and children, but I have been in correspondence with Hannah Lampley, who manages the Voice and Influence team, because I entirely agree with Councillor Groom that I think they're a priority, and I think they're a priority because from the children's services angle, the Voice and Influence team do amazing work around the representation of children, but it tends to be other specific groups like the Care Leavers Council or Have a Voice Council for Looked After Children, or obviously they've got the Youth Council and the UK Youth Parliament where they're supporting our reps, but obviously like a lot of the children that are reached by the youth summits don't go to youth council. We've got children's mayor as well. But I think these are really important just from the point of view of the number of children that they reach and how important they are for talking to children about democracy. I think they work best when they come here, when we do the going into the council chamber. So I've raised the points Councillor Graham raised with Hannah that I think they absolutely have to be prioritised. The resource issue from the children's side, from the voice and influence side, is that Richard Crackner, I mean, the voice and influence team has shrunk massively in the reductions in funding, like the Child Friendly Leeds team and the voice and influence team have been brought together, and both teams are reduced under Hannah's leadership. And Richard Cracknell's just left to go and work for the NHS. He was the person who did the fantastic facilitation role of the youth summits, but they are replacing that post. Yeah, they are replacing that post. And Hannah and I have had an email conversation where she said, if we were to prioritise youth summits as part of that post, obviously something else would have to go, and so that needs thinking about. But I've said they need to be prioritised. So from the children's services point of view, as far as I'm concerned, we will have that resource. I know there's a community angles as well, because it's the community team and the children's services directorate working together to deliver those, isn't it? But so from the children's services side, the resource will be there. I would agree with Councillor Green that if it's not within the capacity of the communities team, then we should use wellbeing money and agree like a contribution from each ward.
I'm really pleased in terms of what you said about the position with the voice and influence team, because obviously it's their decision of what they do with that post, but my understanding was that the decision hadn't been made at this point, so it's really reassuring. And if I can just reassure you that the resource commitment from us is still there to provide support around those events taking place. But I think it is worth, if we want to do something sooner, before the beginning of the next municipal year, perhaps thinking about whether there is a local third sector organisation that we could commission to work with us around getting that off the ground. But that's something certainly that we could support and would want to work with you on.
Okay, so we can come back to that at a future meeting and look at a progress update and where we are on that. Thank you, Liz. Any more questions on that report? No? Okay, right, thank you everybody. We're just on time. It's a couple of minutes to 8. So well done everybody. Just before I go on to the next meeting, is there any other business that anybody wants to raise? Councillor Venner.
It's just an admin thing that I forgot to give apologies to Stephen Gavani at the beginning, who's one of the Kirksall co-optees. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Gruen.
Some of us have just come from the steering group meeting for the West Leeds Activity Centre, and we've been asked to raise the issue of possibly having some of these meetings there, which we would very much like to do, preferably in the summer. But is it still the intention that we will circulate around the Inner West?
Yes, the meeting in March, as we agreed at the beginning of the meeting in March will be held in the Inner West. It means that we can't webcast, but obviously that's something the community team are looking at for us. So myself and Councillor McKenna, just before the meeting started, had a quick chat about this as well, and he raised that. So if people are in agreement, then we can ask Karen to investigate holding the March meeting at the West Leeds Activity Centre. I think the room is big enough for us all to space out, and it's, you know, it's a venue that we all know that we can all get to. So are people in agreement that we hold it there on the next meeting is the 9th of March?
And I would suggest perhaps, I mean, we circulate around the 3 wards, but because that is actually right plonked in the middle of the 3 wards, it's particularly convenient. And maybe we could inject that one. You could do 1, 3, and then we could always put that one in, if you see it on a regular basis, perhaps more regularly than some of the ones that are on the extreme edge of one of the wards that are more difficult to get to.
Okay, so the next meeting is on Wednesday, the 9th of March, 2022 at 6 p.m. And so are we all in agreement? Sorry, you want to come in on this, sorry.
It is a different matter. So.
Oh, okay. Right, can I just take agreement that we will ask West Leeds Activity Centre if they can accommodate us on the 9th of March?
Providing it's been gritted.
We want that route doing. Okay, thank you, everybody. Kat.
Just wondering, will there be a chance to get to more MEs, Armley co-optees for the next session, and how does that happen? And I know Jim mentioned last time that it was hard to get people of Armley, but I think we could find some willing volunteers.
Absolutely. If obviously the two of the Armley councillors are here, and if you have people, you know, in the community who would be interested in attending as co-optees, then absolutely, if you can speak to Councillor McKenna and Councillor Cunningham, and they can put that forward, and we can adopt that then at the next meeting. That can be adopted at the next meeting, and they can come along to the meetings then. Yeah, that'd be fantastic. Thank you. Okay, so if we have no other business and we're all agreed on the next meeting is the 9th of March at the West Leeds Activity Centre, I shall declare the meeting closed. And thank you all for coming, and thank you all for your